Life becomes heavy the moment we start, believing that someone else's journey is better than ours. And in today's world, comparison is everywhere, on screens, in conversations, even in our own minds. This is the story of a young man who learned one of the most important lessons of life. You don't grow by becoming someone else. You grow by becoming yourself. In a small town surrounded by quiet hills lived a boy named Ethan. On the outside, he seemed like everyone else: simple clothes, quiet nature, soft heart. But inside, he carried a weight no one could see. Every day he compared his life with others. When he opened social media, he saw people traveling, buying expensive things, celebrating achievements. When he went to school, he saw classmates who were faster, richer, smarter. And every time he compared himself, a little more confidence disappeared. Ethan would sit alone at night, whispering to himself, "Why am I not like them? Why is everyone ahead of me? Why does my life look so small?" He didn't notice that while he was busy watching others rise, he had stopped rising himself. One afternoon, when the stress became too much, he walked to the old forest near his village. There, under the oldest tree, sat Grandpa Joe, a wise man everyone respected. Ethan approached him quietly. "Grandpa," he said, his voice shaking, "I work hard, but when I see others doing better, I feel broken. I feel like I'll never be enough." Grandpa Joe looked at him, not with surprise, but with understanding. Then he said, "Sit with me tomorrow morning. There is something I want to show you." The next day, when the sunlight was still soft, Ethan returned. Grandpa Joe pointed at the forest around them. "Tell me what you see." Ethan looked and replied, "Different trees. Tall, short, wide, thin, all kinds." Grandpa Joe asked, "Now imagine this small apple tree wishing it was tall like the pine, or the pine wishing it had sweet fruit like the apple. Would that make any sense?" Ethan shook his head. "No, that would be silly." "That silliness," Grandpa said calmly, "is exactly what humans do. Every tree grows in its own time, its own shape, its own strength. But humans, we stare at others and forget our own purpose." Ethan stayed silent, thinking deeply. Grandpa Joe continued, "Come, there's something else." They walked to a pond. Fish swam peacefully in the water, while a beautiful bird soared high above them. Grandpa asked, "Should the fish feel sad because it cannot fly?" "Of course not," Ethan said. "And should the bird feel ashamed because it cannot swim?" "No." Grandpa smiled gently. "Then why do you feel sad for not living someone else's life? You're comparing your beginning to someone else's middle. You're comparing your weaknesses to someone else's strengths. That is not fair to them, and especially to yourself." Those words hit Ethan like a warm shock. For the first time, he realized the truth. His pain wasn't coming from failure. It was coming from comparison. That morning changed something inside him. A small spark, a small shift, a small voice whispering, "Maybe I don't need to be like them. Maybe I just need to be me." He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of the biggest transformation of his life. Ethan walked home that evening with Grandpa Joe's words echoing in his mind. For the first time, he wasn't looking at people around him as competition. He wasn't comparing their strengths with his weaknesses. Instead, he began noticing small things about himself, things he never appreciated before. That night, instead of scrolling through social media and feeling bad about other people's achievements, he sat at his desk and asked himself a simple question: "What can I do that makes me feel alive?" He wrote 3 things. "I'm patient. I'm hardworking. I care about people." When he looked at those words, something inside him softened. Maybe he wasn't lacking. Maybe he just never recognized what he had. The next morning at school, Ethan behaved differently. When he saw Liam topping the class again, he didn't feel jealousy. He felt admiration. "He's good at studying," Ethan thought, "and I'm good at different things." When he saw Ryan's expensive bicycle, he didn't feel poor or small. He simply smiled and whispered, "That's his journey, not mine." Day by day, his mind started to heal. He studied better because his thoughts were calmer. He worked harder because he was no longer trying to be someone else. He was trying to be himself. Slowly, his teachers noticed his growing confidence. His friends noticed he wasn't sad or frustrated anymore. There was a quiet strength in him now, as if he had finally stopped fighting the world and started walking with it. One afternoon, Grandpa Joe found Ethan sitting near the old tree again. "How do you feel now?" the old man asked. Ethan looked up and smiled. Lighter, free, and happier. Grandpa Joe chuckled softly. Good, because when you stop comparing yourself to others, you finally start seeing who you really are. But the real test came a few weeks later. A sports competition was announced at school. Ethan wasn't fast. He wasn't strong. He wasn't expecting anything. But this time something inside him whispered, try anyway. During the race, all the fast runners left him behind. But Ethan didn't stop. He kept running, not to beat them, not to prove anything, but to finish what he started. When he crossed the finish line last, he expected laughter. But something unexpected happened. Everyone clapped. Not because he won, but because he didn't quit. For Ethan, that applause felt bigger than any trophy. That day, he realized something powerful. When you stop comparing your journey, even your smallest victory becomes meaningful. And with that, Ethan took another step toward becoming the person he was meant to be. Ethan went home that evening with a quiet strength inside him. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel small when he looked at others. He didn't feel weak, lost, or disappointed in who he was. Instead, he felt something new, clarity. He understood he didn't need to copy anyone. He just needed to become the best version of himself. The next morning, instead of scrolling through social media and comparing his life to everyone else's highlight reel, he opened a notebook and wrote 3 simple lines. I will grow in my own time. I will respect my own journey. I will no longer measure myself with someone else's success. These words became his new beginning. Days turned into weeks. Ethan slowly changed from the inside out. When he studied, he didn't worry about Liam's grades. When he walked past Ryan's big house, he didn't feel jealous. Instead, he felt grateful for his own path. He started noticing his own strengths, his patience, his creativity, his ability to help others, and his quiet determination. One afternoon, while helping a group of kids in the village with their homework, something unexpected happened. A little girl tugged on his sleeve and said, Ethan, you explain things better than anyone. You're really good at this. Her words touched his heart. For the first time, he realized he had a gift of teaching, something he had never noticed because he was too busy comparing himself to others. That night, he looked in the mirror and didn't see the boy who was never enough. He saw someone growing, someone becoming. Years passed, and Ethan kept building on his strengths. With time, he opened a small learning center in the village for children who couldn't afford expensive tutors. What began as a simple idea turned into something much bigger. Kids came from nearby towns just to learn from him. Parents thanked him because their children finally understood things that once felt impossible. Ethan, the boy who once believed he wasn't good enough, had become the person others looked up to. One evening, after a long day at the learning center, Ethan stood outside watching the sunset glow through the forest trees, the same forest where Grandpa Joe had taught him the biggest lesson of his life. A quiet smile spread across his face. He whispered, I'm glad I didn't try to be someone else. Later, when people asked him how he became so successful, he always answered with the same simple truth. When you stop comparing yourself to others, you finally have the freedom to grow. A bird doesn't try to swim. A fish doesn't try to fly. They follow their nature, and that's why they thrive. Accept who you are, build your strengths, and life will open doors you never imagined. And that became his message to the world. You are enough. Not when you become like someone else, but when you become who you are meant to be. If this story moved you, remember to share it with someone who needs to hear it.